Welcome back to Kata Tech World. We've reached the exciting finale in our Docker interview questions and answers series with part 4. In this segment, we're exploring real-world Docker use cases and best practices. Whether you're aiming to ace an interview or level up your Docker skills, this is the episode for you. Before we dive in, please support our channel by liking this video, sharing it with your fellow tech enthusiasts, leaving any questions or feedback in the comments, and subscribing for more tech insights. Now, let's explore the real-world applications and best practices in part 4 of Docker interview questions and answers. 1. Describe common use cases for Docker in real-world applications. Docker is widely used in real-world applications, including web hosting, hosting web applications and websites using containers; microservices, building and managing microservices architectures; continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD, automating application testing and deployment pipelines; data analytics, running data analysis and processing tasks in containers; IoT, Internet of Things, deploying containers on edge devices for IoT applications; hybrid and multi-cloud deployments, ensuring consistency across different cloud providers. 2. How do you handle persistent data in Docker containers? Persistent data in Docker containers can be managed using Docker volumes or bind mounts. Here's an example of creating and using a Docker volume. Create a Docker volume. Docker volume create my data. Run a container and mount the volume. Docker run versus my data skeptical smiley face app, data my image. 3. What are the challenges and best practices for managing secrets in Docker containers? Challenges include securely storing secrets and controlling access. Best practices involve using Docker's secret management or external secret stores, and encrypting secrets. For example, using Docker secrets. Create a Docker secret. Echo my_secret_password. Docker secret create db_password. Run a service with a secret. Docker service create name my app secret db_password my image. 4. How can you monitor and troubleshoot Docker containers in production environments? Monitoring and troubleshooting in production can be achieved using tools like Prometheus for monitoring and Grafana for visualization. Docker's built-in logging can help with troubleshooting. For example, using Docker Compose to set up monitoring and logging. You can see example screenshot in backend. 5. Explain the concept of Docker Compose and Docker Swarm. How do they differ? Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container applications using a single YAML file. It simplifies development and testing. Docker Swarm is an orchestration platform for managing containerized services across multiple hosts, designed for production use. Compose is for development, while Swarm is for production orchestration. 6. What are the advantages of using Docker Swarm over Kubernetes for container orchestration? Docker Swarm advantages include simplicity, ease of use, native Docker integration, and suitability for smaller deployments. Here's an example of creating a Docker Swarm service. Initialize a Swarm cluster. Docker Swarm init. Create a service. Docker service create name my service my image. 7. How can you secure your Docker containers and infrastructure in a production environment? Securing Docker containers involves multiple practices, including using official images, image scanning, limiting container permissions, network segmentation, read-only file systems, user namespaces, and access controls. For example, defining security options in a Docker Compose file. You can see example screenshot in backend. 8. Describe best practices for optimizing Docker container performance. Optimizing Docker container performance includes managing resources efficiently, minimizing image size, reducing layers, and optimizing application code. Monitoring with Prometheus and Grafana can help identify performance bottlenecks. 9. What is the principle of immutable infrastructure, and how does it apply to Docker? Immutable infrastructure treats infrastructure as code and creates new, immutable instances for any changes. Docker aligns well with this principle as containers are built from immutable images. Here's an example of using Docker for immutable infrastructure. Build a new container image. Docker build my app. Latest. Deploy the new image. Docker service update image my app. Latest my service. 10. How can you achieve continuous integration and continuous deployment (CI/CD) with Docker in your application development pipeline? Achieving CI/CD with Docker involves using Docker images, Docker Compose, and container orchestration tools. Here's an example of a basic CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins and Docker. You can see pipeline script in backend. Thank you for joining us in the final installment of Docker Interview Questions and Answers. We hope you've gained valuable insights into Docker's real-world use cases and best practices. If you have questions or need further clarification on any of the topics covered in this series, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. Your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing motivates us to continue creating content for you. Stay tuned for more tech content in the future. Until then, keep containerizing and applying these best practices, and we'll see you in the next episode.